Today, we're talking Brian Koberger. We're talking my theory as to how Brian Koberger committed this crime. And we're also going to talk about the prosecution and what I think their best case is or what they're doing based on the evidence that we have. I think there's a lot there. Obviously, we don't have all the evidence, but I think there's a lot there within the hundreds of pages, if not thousands of pages, that have been released from the Court, uh, Idaho Court Judicial Branch website. And so this website here is the state of Idaho versus Brian Koberger. As you can see, there's tons of documents here. I've gone through majority of it, and in my opinion, I think I can kind of figure out a little bit of what the prosecution is doing, what they're saying, and what their idea is. So this is going to be a two-series venture. The first part is going to be the prosecution in their case, and the second part, which will be aired out a little bit later this week, is going to be about Brian Koberger's likely defense and what defense will probably be used and what to expect from Brian Koberger's defense team based on the evidence that is out there and how they probably plan to attack this. So, went through all this. I think I got a pretty good idea. Hit that like and subscribe button, ring that notification bell. That way you're notified of our daily lives that we do, our daily live segments and our weekly segments shows. That being said, let's get into it. So, like I said before, everything is pretty much put on here. I know there's been a lot of speculation that perhaps maybe they found Brian Koberger's name and some other means other than, searching WSU registered owners that had a white Elantra and coming across Brian Koberger. I don't think that's the case. When it comes to the media, when it comes to the public, when it comes to talking to, suspects, witnesses, whoever, the police department and law enforcement have the ability to be untruthful. They can lie and manipulate what they're saying in efforts to discover the truth, right? The same rule doesn't apply when it comes to court documents. If they were to put something on there in a court document purposefully misleading or not being truthful, then that's perjury. And so everything that we read in here about what they say, in my opinion, maybe not everything is in there, but what they're saying is true. There might be more to the story. I don't think that that there would be a flat out lie. So let's kind of break into it. And also, just another thing, we're going to break down, like I said, what the prosecution is doing. And then afterwards, in this episode, I'm also going to show you guys how I think Brian Koberger committed this crime step by step. So the first thing that we wanted to find out is when or how soon after November 13th was Brian Koberger on the radar for police department. And I think that was on the 25th of November. Now, we can look at the probable cause affidavit. Right here it says November 25th, MPD, which is Moscow Police Department, asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for the white Elantra, that they had seen on their camera, right? On the 29th at approximately 12:28, Washington State University police officer Daniel Tango queried white Elantras and registered at WSU. That result came up with Brian Koberger's vehicle, right? It was residing at 1630 North Valley Road, apartment 201. Another officer, Curtis Whitman, who's also looking for it, arrived at the address, probably at the order of Tango. They also look up who the driver is, and it comes in back in as Koberger, is matches the description of the person that Dylan said that she saw in the house on the night of November 13th. Right? I think that helped them get on his trail, but that alone isn't enough to get a warrant, right? And I think there's reasons, especially for his cell phone data. And I think there's a reason why it took from November 29th to December 7th for the police department to get that warrant. On December 23rd, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical data for records between 12 and 14 for the 8458 phone held by the AT&T provider, right? And so this is the 23rd is when they also received those records. This is for Koberger's phone. Just the description of Koberger and the fact that he had a white Elantra wasn't enough to give him a warrant, not in my opinion. And this is also before they received the DNA, because the DNA from Koberger's father wasn't picked up until the 27th of December, right? And so that's still after the fact. And the DNA on Koberger's father on the 27th is from trash that was discarded at Koberger's family residence. It wasn't the trash that was discarded at the neighbor's house. So they had been watching him for a few days, and the police there in Pennsylvania, and they had seen him walk across to the neighbor's yard and drop some trash off. That's not the trash that they were utilizing to get Koberger's cell phone data. I think that they needed to get this cell phone data in order to justify going and picking up the trash. And the reason being, not saying that they needed justification to it, but when you look at the bigger scope of the investigation, you want to justify every move that you make. But what did they get to get that warrant in the first place, right? I've looked at several different things. In fact, I have the search warrant here for the search warrant for the cell phone. It's right here. It says, Brett Payne, having given me proof upon this day showing probable cause, establishing grounds to issue the search warrant, probable cause to believe property consists of certain evidence regarding investigation into crimes of homicide, 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, is on the AT&T account associated with the phone number, and it's redacted between November 12th at 12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to November 14th, 2022 at 12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Information should include user account information, location data, and stored communications held by AT&T, described in further detail as follows. This is the search warrant for Bryan Kohberger's cell phone and his pings and all of his text messages and everything. And, this is the return. Please provide the information to Brett Payne, digital format and compact disc, in several different formats that they have there listed. And that they have 14 days to do so, and this is signed on the 23rd. So between the November 29th and December 23rd, something had to have come up. They gave them probable cause to get the warrant for to get his data from his cell phone. What could it have been? All right, so let's look back at the warrant for Bryan Kohberger's arrest from Pennsylvania. And it says here on December 23rd, pursuant to search warrant, I received records for 84588 phone from AT&T. These records indicated that phone was subscribed to Bryan Kohberger's address in Albrights, Pennsylvania. The account has been open since June 23rd. Based on information provided on the WSU website, Kohberger is currently a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Kohberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Kohberger wrote in his essay that he had an interest assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Kohberger also posted in a Reddit survey, which can be found by an open source internet search. The survey asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. As part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine the cellular devices that utilize cell towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November 13 between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. After determining that Kohberger was associated both with the White Elantra and the 8458 phone. Investigators reviewed the search warrant returns. A query of the 8458 phone and these returns did not show that the 8458 phone was utilizing cell phone towers resources of proximity to the King Road between the time listed, 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. And so they go on saying that they believe that he either turned it off or put it on airplane mode, right? Now, this all says, in my opinion, one is he's a psychology major in criminal justice. These are things that he would be searching. I don't understand why he would get a search. You could get a search warrant based on, the criteria of the things that he does at work at school with WSU, unless something in their investigation pointed to the crime scene. For instance, maybe perhaps he talked about had he done this, he would do a certain thing. maybe wear booties or whatever the case may be, right? And maybe perhaps they suspect that that detail was possibly used, linked, described, fell in whatever description you want to put with the crime scene that occurred on 1122 King Road on November 13th. And so, for instance, I think that they have found something that connects Kohberger to the crime as far as a detail that we're not yet aware of. Because I don't think that his studies alone is enough to get a warrant. But something in that investigation that lasted about 21 days is what prompt the search warrant for the cellular device. Right? I mean, once they got the pings, they went and got the trash for the DNA. Once the DNA came back, that's when they got the arrest warrant for Kohberger based on all of those things, right? Granted, they're saying that he didn't have his phone on during the time. However, later they're going to find out once they pull more inquiries that he did have the phone or what he had his phone with him before the incident and after and was operating his vehicle, obviously. And so it's not just like he wasn't there, right? And so this is how they got to him, in my opinion. This all leads up to it. Now, of course, there's some information we don't know. We don't know the results of the car. You know, was any blood found in his Elantra? Is there any DNA that leads back to one of the victims? I think if that comes out, he's a goner. There's no way that he ends up getting off on this, right? Now, how did he do it, though? Let's talk about how he did it and what the police department think or what led up to the events, right? And so let's go back to the warrant on his house or his apartment. So this one right here, this is a search of his apartment complex, right? And let's go down to what it is that they were looking for. So this is a search within 10 days. Apartment located at 1630 Northeast Valley Road. Apartment complex G201 in Pullman, Washington, right? Now let's find out why or what it is that they're looking for. Obviously, looking for blood or the bloody fluid, human tissue, skin cells, things like that. The next thing would be the weapon, knives, sheath, or other sharp tools. And then it gets interesting. It says number 3, any images, whether digital or paper or neither format, which show the victims, Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, Madison, Bethany, and Dylan, or also the house, right? Now, the reason why they want this is I think they suspect that he planned this and had planned this for oncoming days, right? In fact, when they talk about the investigation, I think one of the aspects about as far as the cell phone towers I read was that he was they were looking for somebody that had done extensive planning on how to get away with a crime. And I think, you know what, actually, I think it's on here. We'll go into it. So the next thing that they're looking for is clothing, which would, match what Dylan stated that she saw: dark shirts, dark pants, masks, shoes with a diamond sole pattern. Trace evidence, including DNA of blood, skin, cells, other sources, footprints, fingerprints, human hair, animal/dog. We know that Kaylee had a dog, Murphy, that was in the house. And so dog shed, there's a possibility that he brought that back. Right here, data computations, whether digital, electronic, or paper, or the format showing interest in planning of taking someone's life, assault by force, and hurting people with the use of a edged weapon. And it says that in other words. You guys can fill in the blanks. And data showing details of the residents there, 1122 King Road, and information on the victims. Right? Showing Kohberger or the cell phone number, and they were looking for his phone here. It says right here, not his phone. There were information about Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, Bethany, and/or Dylan, and data computation showing location of Brian Kohberger or the cell phone number on November 13, 2022, including Wi-Fi logs and data or metadata associated with photos, social media posts, or applications on cell phones. Computer towers, an example, but not intended for exclusive lists for data complications being sought, like ledgers, papers, lists, books, notes, letters, calendars, dress books, contact list, diary, etc. Right. So basically, what they're thinking is that this guy planned this out very well, right? And that they think that there should be evidence of that planning, whether it's pictures, notes, those type of things, and they feel that that they will find that in his apartment complex or on his digital devices. Right. And so electronic digital devices, storage devices, which may contain the above computations, including cell phones, towers, hard drives, thumbnails, evidence and other associated accounts associated with devices, including email address, social media accounts, messaging apps. So they're thinking that he possibly was stalking them, not just in person. When we look at the pings that he's been there, I think it was like on 12 different occasions, but also digitally on social media and virtually. Right. And we also do know that he had significant amount of photos of at least one victim. It's been suspected that it was Madison Mogen, right, on his phone. And so evidence of use of device to conduct internet searches relating to the review of taking someone's life, violent assaults, and hurting people with edged weapons, as well as how to avoid detection after the commission of such crimes. And so, in my opinion, I think the prosecution believes that there was some detailed plans there and some detailed planning. And I think a lot of that has to do with probably they have a lot of the same questions, or, they had a lot of concerns there when they saw that, how clean the scene was, as far as the lack of maybe DNA and only having one DNA source on the sheath, one footprint, things like that. The fact that they don't really see him leave Moscow, Idaho. Digitally, he avoids at least one camera that would be leaving Idaho 95 South out of Idaho, which when he does turn on his phone is where he's found, 10 miles south of. And so I think that they believe that he went to a large extent to plan this. This wasn't a plan. This wasn't like a passion type of thing or a heat of the moment. This is something that they believe he planned for a while. Now, what evidence do we have of this planning? First and foremost, he went back to school as a TSA that following Monday, maintained his routine. He also had a routine doctor's appointment, which he maintained. In this article here, apparently the staff was smitten by Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger could have set this appointment up and, had to do it on the 13th. And it just kind of brings up why the 13th, right? Is it because, one, he had to maintain his routine. So if he waited another week, there would have been Thanksgiving break. Thus, he wouldn't have been able to have gone to school to be that teacher's assistant so that he can, show his face. I think that's one thing. Second, he had a medical appointment that he had planned ahead of time. Maintaining it would also show a sign of something that you wouldn't commonly expect out of somebody who committed this crime, right? And also, November 13th, is it possible, based on Kohberger's experience or, his education and possibly ties to law enforcement, was he aware of the operation that was occurring that night, targeting underage drinking in the area? It was, a lot of the neighbors came forward and talked about how it was extremely quiet night, right? And one of the reasons, in my opinion, it was quiet is because, one, let's remember what day it was. It was the last home game for the Vandals. It was a week before vacation. A lot of people were already leaving, and a lot of people were going to leave. So you can expect a high amount of people drinking that night. And so the Moscow Police Department had a undercover or unmarked operation, and they were targeting underage drinkers, people drinking outside. It's evident based on the body cam footage that we're watching right now. Now, they were out there fairly late till about 3:15. Bryan Kohberger left and arrived, around that area shortly after that time. Was he aware of this going on? Was he aware that there wasn't going to be a party and that he had to do it this week? That's why so much planning went into it. Possible. Now, let's look at Kohberger and the route that he took. And we'll get into how he committed this crime. So I believe that he did take off from his house at 2:42 a.m. He's seen on several cameras throughout Pullman up until about 2:47. At 2:53, I believe, he leaves Pullman, or is seen leaving in the direction of leaving Pullman towards SR 270, which ends up going towards Moscow, Idaho. Now, when he arrives, if he left at 2:53, he should have arrived around 3:03 to 3:10, right? But he's not seen until 3:26 a.m. on the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive, right? That's when the probable cause affidavit brings him up first. Now, that's in a neighborhood east of the neighborhood that the victims lived in. Now, he was coming from a town west of the town of Moscow, so it didn't make sense at first why he would be in this neighborhood and why he wouldn't initially pass by this house as soon as he went through. I would have assumed that he would have passed by initially just because he's excited. He's planned this. He's going to want to pass by and pass around until he gains confidence to commit the crime, which is what he does at 3:29. He starts passing by, right? But why did it take him 30 minutes from the time that he had left, probably an extra 15 minutes longer than it should have, to pass by initially? Is it because of these guys? These guys were out here until 3:16. Right here it says 3:14, 3:15 already, right? They're still out there at 3:15 a.m. Is it possible Kohberger saw them from a different street, maybe up here? This street up here? Because this is where that stop is, right? I hope you guys can see my cursor. This is where the stop is. Is it possible he drove up here? He could see the police department, waited for them to stop and see if they went back. Because if you're up here at the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive at 3:26 and you're coming this direction, and the next time you're seen is crossing Steiner at 3:28, that's a straight shot, right? That's 2 minutes. That's enough time for you to slow down, maybe even stop, take a look at the Moscow Police Department, and see if that undercover or unmarked vehicle is back at the department, and if the coast is clear for him to continue and to head on to the crime. I believe that's what he did. He looked in, he saw that the vehicle was back, and then headed towards the victim's house, traveled up, turned on Steiner, headed westbound, crossed I-95, and is seen passing by for the first time at 3:29. Now, he makes a total of 4 passes. The fourth time that he passes by, or that he begins to pass by, isn't until 4:04 a.m. Now, we know that Xana received a DoorDash at around 4 a.m. It says approximately 4 a.m., so it's possible that it was 3:55, 3:58, somewhere around there. But Bryan Kohberger passes by on his 4th attempt, and what he does is he ends up at 500 Queen Road, apartment number 52, which is somewhere in here. I don't know if he went up this direction and is turning around back here and he's seen from a camera back here, or if he continues this direction is seen. My assumption is he's probably coming back here. That way he can pass right directly next to the victim's house and get a good view. And then not only that, turn around and come back and get a back view. That's my assumption is what he did. But if he turned here at 4:04, came in, came up, turned around, came back, attempted to park because he probably saw that the lights went out at that time. My assumption is that prior to this, lights were on because Xana and Ethan were awaiting their meal, and then finished their meal. Right. I think by the time that he passes back, attempts to park unsuccessfully, and then goes forward, does a 3-point turn, comes back around and parks, that's already about 4:10 a.m. So this has been about 15, maybe 10 to 15 minutes after the DoorDash meal is received and eaten. So my thoughts are that he's parking and entering the house at 4:10. Right. So this is the entrance of where he comes in. Here's the Jack in the Box bag with the Xana's name. Now we'll notice that the seal is broken, so somebody opened it and consumed, or at least opened it and looked at the items inside the bag. I don't know if somebody consumed it or not. I would assume so, but you can see that. In fact, I'll probably go back and look at some pictures later to verify if there was any Jack in the Box on the table, because I do have pictures of that. I did notice that there was dirt from this pot right here as well on here. I don't understand why. Perhaps maybe they threw the bag. The bag hit some things, it knocked some stuff over. They picked them up and just placed them back without cleaning up. Who knows? So 4:10 comes. I believe Bryan Kohberger enters. I think he is his primary, the person that he is interested in is Maddie. And I think that he'd been watching him for the last week or so. And leading up to this weekend, Kaylee wasn't there. She had left. She had gone back to Coeur d'Alene. She'd been with her parents. And she had only came back into town to show Maddie her vehicle, and was intending on leaving town and going to have a birthday breakfast with her mom early, possibly Tuesday, the Tuesday following the incident, right? And so I believe he comes up. I think he knows which room is Madison's based on driving through there and getting an idea of the area. He enters. I don't think he expected to see Kaylee there with her. And so I think that upset him. My assumption is that he struck Madison first, and then attacked Kaylee second, more viciously, based on the fact that he was probably upset that she was there. He probably had something else planned with Maddie. Now, when it comes to the sheath and the sheath being left here, my assumption is that he's probably not accustomed to wearing that sheath, and that can be uncomfortable while driving. And so I don't think he ever had it on his belt. I think he entered into the room with it out. My opinion is he entered the house with the knife already exposed, in case he were to come across somebody on his way to the room. And when he entered, I think he put the knife down, or the knife sheath down from his hand, so that he can use his hand to cover somebody's mouth or hold somebody restraint, something of that nature. My assumption is that he may have even wanted to go back to this room. He may not have been done. I think he wanted to make sure, if see if anybody heard him or anything. So at 4:17 or 16, I think he leaves this room and he opens this door to see if anybody's in, see if anybody heard him. At that point, this is where Murphy is, Kaylee's dog. He begins to bark. He exits. He closes the door. I think at that point, he and Dylan can hear Xana say, "I think somebody's in the house." So he knows that somebody's awake as he's walking down the hall. So as he's coming down here, I think it's at this point is where Dylan opens the door for the second time. And as the affidavit indicates, so we can pull that up real quick. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Vehicle 1 can be seen entering a fourth time at 4:04. It's driving eastbound and turns around in front of 500 road number 52, then drives back westbound. When the vehicle is in front of King Road, resident appears to unsuccessfully park, turns around on the road, then continue to the intersection of King Road and Queen Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn, driving eastbound again down Queen Road. And then it's not seen again until it's departing the area, right? And so that's from that footage there. Now, if we look at this, so this is Dylan's statement. At approximately 4:17, camera security located at 1112 King Road residence can pick up audio of a dog barking numerous times starting at 4:17. And then it also hears a thud as well, voices and a whimper, right? So the voice could be also possibly, I think somebody's in the room or in the house, right? And so he's walking down, he passes out. I think, in my opinion, at that point, perhaps Ethan and Xana walk out, kind of look around, don't see anything yet because I think Brian is still making his way very quietly down. He may even see them and they may not see him. They turn around and walk back towards the room. Ethan and Xana enter the room, and it is my opinion that when they enter the room, at this point is where it's about 4:17, 4:18. In 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, Brian attacks Ethan first, probably from behind, probably striking him somewhere in the neck, causing fluid to fill his airways so that way he cannot yell or scream. Probably is in shock, throws him down. He's on the ground, probably facing this direction towards the wall, which would, explain why there's blood or blood-like substance coming out of the back of the wall onto the foundation. That might be the thud that you hear. And then I think Xana and him get into it right there. And he rapidly is striking her. She's grabbing at the knife, which would also show why the injuries to her hand, if that report is real, were so severe, and left her here. My assumption is the one or two strikes that he had on Ethan probably weren't enough at that point to take his life, and that he went down and said, "It's okay, I'm here to help," and finished the job there. I think that Dylan yelled something out at that time, and I don't think he was prepared for somebody to be awake, and that startled him. I don't think he understood or heard what was yelled. And so he may have assumed that somebody yelled that they're calling the police or something. So it was time to go. So he turns around, he gets out of there. He understands the proximity and how close the police department is to this residence. And so he books it out of there. Dylan opens the door here. She sees him as he's leaving, and he doesn't do anything because, well, frankly, he doesn't have time. He gets in his car and he takes off. Now, the last ping that we know, or the last image that we have of him, is at 4:20 heading southbound on Walenta Drive. This is where the Moscow Police Department is. I highly doubt, especially if he thinks that the police are onto him, that he would have traveled this direction, because that would have been more than likely one of the directions traveled by police. I would assume that if they were leaving the police department, that they would have gone up 95 and then turn on Steiner, and or if they're well familiar with the area, which they should be, it's not a big area, turn here on this drive, come down all the way around, right? And so my opinion is he turned off here, came around, and found his way out here. Now, he left at 4:20, or he's seen on Walenta Drive traveling at a high rate of speed. His phone is turned on while he's on 95 at 4:48 near the town of Blaine. That's 28 minutes later. He's driving at a high rate of speed trying to get out of town. It's only supposed to be 10 minutes from the victim's house to Blaine, Idaho. Why did it take 28 minutes? My assumption is, well, there's cameras here, and if somebody reported a crime as thus one committed, one would speculate that the police department would come out here and probably put a roadblock here, forbid people to traveling out of town. And so before they could get to that area, his main objective was to travel the other direction, there's a good possibility that, if this crime was discovered earlier, that there may be law enforcement in and around Pullman coming into town. And so my opinion is he left in a different direction, took this back roads. Now the probable cause affidavit says that this road here leads directly to Pullman, Washington, and that may have been the road he took. I agree that it does, but he shows up way over here later. So in my opinion, he took a couple of back roads until he turned this direction up and around until he got back to 95. Took a significant detour, which explains the extra 18 minutes. And once he's there, he turns on his phone. I would suspect that, he's probably looking to see if there is news coverage already, or if there's anything being reported, if there's a alert for a stay in shelter because of what just occurred. And I'm pretty sure he's fairly surprised when he doesn't see it. He ends up taking this super long way home, which is another indication to me that it wouldn't put past him to take a long way just to get to this area. And is seen going back home at 5:30. He ends up going back at like 9 o'clock the next morning. And in my opinion, I believe that is because he hadn't heard about his crime yet, and he was kind of concerned about it. And so, well, maybe not so much concerned. He was confused by not having heard about the crime. And so he goes back one time. But I think that's how he did it, and I think he did it by himself. Let me know in the comment section, y'all, what you guys think of my explanation. Remember, there's a second part to this, and that second part, we're going to be talking about Kohberger's defense and the likely defense that he'll have. I know there's supposed to be some more documents that will be released anytime now. Once those are, we'll be making another video talking about those things. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Let me know if there's anything about this that you'd like to add to it, or that would change your idea of how this went down. But with that being said, I'm Daniel J. This is the Drunk Turkey Show. We'll see you next time. Peace.